The moment I opened my eyes in my childhood bedroom, staring at the faded pink wallpaper I'd begged my parents to replace when I was 16, I knew something impossible had happened. The last thing I remembered was lying in that hospital bed, my fiancé, Adrian, holding my hand while promising he'd take care of everything. The irony wasn't lost on me now. I was 22 again, sitting in my old twin bed, with morning sunlight streaming through windows that had been boarded up for years in my previous timeline. My phone showed March 15th, 2019, exactly 5 years before my death. 5 years before Adrian and his precious Vivienne destroyed everything I'd built. My grandmother's voice echoed from downstairs, calling me for breakfast. Grandma Rose had been dead for 3 years in my previous life, yet here she was, alive and making her famous blueberry pancakes. The sacred money tree sat in its honoured place by the kitchen window, its jade leaves catching the morning light like tiny emeralds. "Isabella, sweetie, you've been staring at that tree for 10 minutes. Grandma Rose chuckled, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. "Something wrong?" I touched one of the smooth leaves, feeling the familiar warmth that pulsed through the ancient plant. The Fernandez family money tree had been passed down for 7 generations, each leaf supposedly holding the power to attract wealth and prosperity. My great-great-grandmother had brought it from Mexico, and it had never failed our family. Until Adrian got his hands on it. "Just appreciating it, Grandma. It's beautiful." She beamed, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. "Your great-great-grandmother always said the tree chooses its guardian. When I'm gone, it'll be yours to protect." In my previous life, I'd inherited the tree when Grandma Rose passed 6 months later. By then, I was already dating Adrian, the charming law student who'd swept me off my feet with his easy smile and ambitious dreams. He'd been fascinated by the tree, asking endless questions about its history and properties. I thought it was sweet how interested he was in my family's traditions. What a fool I'd been. My phone buzzed with a text from Adrian himself. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Dinner at Romano's?" Romano's. The same restaurant where he had first told me he loved me. Where he'd proposed 2 years later. Where, in my previous timeline, he'd introduced me to Vivienne as his colleague, neglecting to mention they'd dated for 3 years before we met. I deleted the message without responding. Instead, I spent the morning with Grandma Rose, helping her tend to her garden and listening to stories I'd forgotten in the rush of my previous life. She told me about the tree's power, how it had helped our family survive the Great Depression, how it had guided my grandfather to the investment that made our modest fortune. "But, Isabella," she said, her weathered hands gentle on my shoulders, "the tree only works for those with pure intentions. It knows when someone tries to use its power for greed or deceit. The consequences for betraying its trust are severe." I filed that information away carefully. That afternoon, I drove to Adrian's apartment near the university. Everything looked exactly as I remembered. The same cramped studio, the same law books scattered across his desk, the same photo of us at last year's Christmas party, sitting prominently on his nightstand. What I hadn't noticed before was the small framed picture tucked behind it. Adrian, with his arm around a stunning redhead with emerald eyes. Vivienne. "Isabella, you're early," Adrian said, emerging from the bathroom with a towel around his waist. Even now, I had to admit he was attractive, tall, athletic build, the kind of confident smile that had made me fall for him. But knowing what I knew now, that smile looked calculated. "Thought I'd surprise you." I picked up the hidden photo. "Who's this?" For just a second, his composure slipped. "Oh, that's just Vivienne. We went to high school together. She's in my contracts class now." Lies. They had dated through most of college before she'd moved to California for graduate school. She'd only returned to our city 6 months ago, coincidentally, right around the time Adrian had started acting distant. "She's pretty," I said, setting the photo back down. "Not as pretty as you." He kissed my forehead, and I forced myself not to pull away. "Ready for dinner?" At Romano's, Adrian was his usual charming self, telling funny stories about his professors and asking about my graphic design projects. But I watched him carefully now, noting how his eyes wandered to other women, how he checked his phone constantly, how he seemed distracted even while maintaining the appearance of attentiveness. "I've been thinking," I said during dessert, "maybe you should come meet my grandmother properly. She's been wanting to show you her garden." "Your grandmother's great, but you know how busy school keeps me." In my previous life, Adrian had eagerly accepted every invitation to visit Grandma Rose. He'd charmed her completely, asking detailed questions about the money tree, even offering to help research its botanical properties. Now I understood why. He'd been gathering intelligence. "She won't be around forever, Adrian?" Something flickered across his face. "Of course, maybe next weekend." As he drove me home, I caught him texting someone at red lights. When I casually glanced over, I saw the name. Vivienne. "Working late again?" I asked innocently. "Study group," he said quickly, putting his phone away. That night, I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling and planning. In my previous life, Adrian had slowly wormed his way deeper into my family's trust. After Grandma Rose's death, he'd helped me research the tree's care, suggested improvements to its placement, even convinced me to let him take cuttings for scientific analysis. What he'd actually done was work with Vivienne, a botany graduate student, to create an identical fake. They'd switched the trees so gradually, replacing one branch at a time, that I'd never noticed. The real tree had been sold to a private collector for over $2 million, money that Adrian and Vivienne had split before disappearing together. I discovered the truth only days before my death, when the fake tree suddenly withered despite my careful attention. A private investigator I'd hired had finally traced the real tree to a mansion in Switzerland, owned by a collector who'd purchased it through Vivienne's contacts. The betrayal had been devastating, but the loss of the tree had been worse. Without its protection, my family's fortune had crumbled. Bad investments, failed business ventures, a series of financial disasters that had left me broke and alone. The stress had triggered the heart condition that eventually killed me. But now I had a second chance, and this time I knew exactly what Adrian and Vivienne were planning. My phone buzzed with another text from Adrian. "Sweet dreams, beautiful, love you." I smiled in the darkness and began typing my response. "See you tomorrow for our study session," I typed back, adding a heart emoji before hitting send. Let him think everything was normal while I planned his downfall. The next morning, I called in sick to my part-time job at the design studio and drove straight to the university library. If I was going to beat Adrian and Vivienne at their own game, I needed to understand exactly how they pulled off their deception. The botany section was tucked away on the third floor, and it didn't take long to spot her. Vivienne sat at a corner table, surrounded by thick textbooks and botanical illustrations. She was even more striking in person than in photographs, the kind of natural beauty that didn't need makeup, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. I settled at a nearby table with my laptop, pretending to work on a design project while observing her. She worked methodically, taking detailed notes about plant propagation and grafting techniques. Every few minutes, she'd check her phone and smile at whatever message she'd received. Around noon, she packed up her materials and headed for the campus coffee shop. I followed at a distance, my heart racing with nervous energy. This was risky. If she recognized me from Adrian's social media, my cover would be blown. But luck was on my side. She ordered her latte and sat alone at a small table, completely absorbed in her phone. From my position behind a pillar, I could see she was texting someone saved as A in her contacts. "Missing you already," one message read. "Can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore." Another buzz. "The girlfriend seems clueless. Everything's going according to plan." My hands clenched into fists, but I forced myself to stay calm. Getting emotional now would ruin everything. I spent the rest of the week gathering intelligence. Vivienne lived in a converted warehouse apartment downtown, drove a beat-up Honda that she parked in the same spot every day, and had a strict routine: library until noon, coffee shop until 2, then afternoon classes or lab work. More importantly, I discovered she was struggling financially. Her student loan documents, carelessly left visible on her library table, showed she owed over $80,000. Her rent was 3 months overdue, according to the eviction notice she'd hastily stuffed into her backpack. Perfect. Desperation made people careless. Meanwhile, Adrian continued his charade of being the devoted boyfriend. He brought me flowers on Wednesday, took me to see a movie on Friday, even suggested we start looking at engagement rings for the future. Each lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly that I almost admired his skill. "You seem distracted lately," he said Saturday night as we walked along the riverfront. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking about Grandma Rose. She's been talking about updating her will." Adrian's step faltered almost imperceptibly. "Oh, that must be emotional for you. She wants to make sure the money tree goes to the right person, someone who will protect the family legacy. I'm sure she knows you'll take excellent care of it. Actually, she's been asking about you, whether you'd help me maintain it properly when the time comes." This time, his reaction was more obvious. A flash of excitement he quickly masked with concern. "I'd be honoured to help, but let's not talk about such sad things. Your grandmother has years ahead of her." If only he knew how calculating he sounded. Sunday morning brought the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Vivienne posted on her Instagram story that she was spending the day at the botanical gardens for research. The perfect cover for what I had planned. I drove to her apartment building and waited in the parking lot until I saw her Honda pull out. Then I called the building's maintenance number, using a voice I'd practiced to sound exactly like hers. "Hi, this is Vivienne Torres in 4B. I locked myself out again, and I have important lab samples that need refrigeration. Could someone let me in?" The maintenance man was sympathetic and didn't ask for ID. "This is the 3rd time this month, miss. Maybe you should get a spare key made." "Definitely," I agreed, following him upstairs. Vivienne's apartment was exactly what I'd expected. Messy, cramped, filled with dying plants and scientific equipment. Her laptop sat open on the kitchen table, still logged into her email. I photographed everything: her correspondence with private collectors, detailed botanical analyses of my family's money tree, even draft contracts for its sale. But the real treasure was hidden in her bedroom closet. A small, refrigerated container held dozens of carefully labelled plant cuttings, all marked with dates and genetic codes. At the very back, I found what I was looking for: 3 perfectly healthy branches from my family's money tree, each one tagged with the notation "Original Specimen Phase 2. Phase 2. They were further along in their plan than I'd realised in my previous life. I photographed the evidence, but left everything untouched. Instead, I focused on what I'd really come for: Vivienne's collection of rare succulent cuttings from her legitimate research. She had samples worth thousands of dollars, all carefully maintained and documented for her thesis project. Working quickly, I switched the labels on several containers, mixing up her temperature requirements and care instructions. The delicate lithops specimens now had care cards for desert cacti. The tropical epiphytes were labelled for alpine conditions. It would take weeks for the damage to become apparent, but when it did, months of research would be destroyed. But that was just the beginning. I slipped out of the apartment and drove directly to the address I'd memorised from Vivienne's correspondence, a high-end nursery that specialised in rare and exotic plants. The owner, Mr. Kim, was exactly as I remembered from my previous life's investigations: elderly, meticulous, and absolutely obsessed with authenticity. "I'm calling about some specimens that might be coming your way, I said, showing him the photos I'd taken of Vivienne's emails. I think you should know they're not what they claim to be. His face darkened as he examined the evidence. This is very serious. We have a reputation to maintain. I thought you should be aware before any transactions take place. By the time I left the nursery, I knew Mr. Kim would be watching Vivienne very carefully. Any attempt to sell him stolen cuttings would backfire spectacularly. That evening, Adrian called to cancel our dinner date. Emergency study group, he claimed, but I could hear Vivienne's laughter in the background. No problem, I said sweetly. I'll just spend the evening with Grandma Rose. She's been wanting to teach me more about the money tree's care. This time Adrian couldn't hide his interest. Really? What kind of things? Oh, you know, family secrets, traditional methods passed down through generations. That sounds fascinating. Maybe I could... Actually, she specifically said it should stay in the family for now. Something about the tree being more sensitive than we realised. The line went quiet for several seconds. Of course, I understand. But I could hear the frustration in his voice. Perfect. The next phase of my plan was already taking shape. If Adrian and Vivienne wanted to steal my family's legacy, they were welcome to try. But this time, they discovered that some treasures came with a price they weren't prepared to pay. 3 weeks later, Vivienne's carefully constructed world began crumbling exactly as I'd planned. Her thesis advisor, Dr. Martinez, called an emergency meeting after discovering that half her research specimens had died due to gross negligence in care protocols. The destroyed samples represented 8 months of work, and her funding was immediately suspended pending a full investigation. I watched from across the campus quad as Vivienne stormed out of the biology building, her face streaked with tears. She immediately called Adrian, her voice carrying across the courtyard as she sobbed into her phone about academic disaster and financial ruin. "Everything's falling apart!" she cried. "We need that money now more than ever." Adrian's response was swift. That very evening, he arrived at my apartment with a bouquet of roses and a proposal that made my blood run cold with its calculated manipulation. "Isabella, I've been thinking about our future," he said, pulling me onto the couch beside him. "I want to be more involved in your family's traditions. Maybe I could help you care for the money tree. Learn its secrets. Adrian, that tree has been in my family for generations. It's not something we share lightly." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "But I'm going to be your husband someday, aren't I? Shouldn't that make me family?" The presumption in his voice was staggering. In my previous life, I'd been flattered by his interest. Now I recognized it for what it was. Greed disguised as devotion. "Let me talk to Grandma Rose," I said carefully. "She's very protective of family traditions." That weekend, I spent hours with Grandma Rose in her garden, ostensibly learning about the money tree's care while actually preparing for the most crucial phase of my revenge. She taught me to identify the tree's subtle signs of health, how its leaves changed colour when stressed, and most importantly, how to propagate new growth from its branches. "The tree bonds with its caretaker," she explained, her weathered hands gentle on the jade leaves. "It knows your touch, your intentions. That's why it's never thrived for anyone outside our bloodline." "What would happen if someone tried to steal it?" Her expression grew grave. "The tree remembers betrayal, Mija. It carries the weight of broken trust. Anyone who harms it or its family, well, karma has a way of evening the scales." Monday morning brought devastating news for Vivienne. Mr. Kim had filed a formal complaint with the university after she'd attempted to sell him what she claimed were rare botanical specimens. Her stolen cuttings from my family's tree had been discovered during his investigation, and criminal charges for theft were being prepared. I found her in the library that afternoon, frantically making phone calls to lawyers she couldn't afford. Her conversation with Adrian was desperate and revealing. "They found everything," she whispered harshly into her phone. "We're out of time. You need to get that tree now before she realizes what's happening. Adrian's plan moved into high gear immediately. He began showing up at Grandma Rose's house almost daily, charming her with stories about his law studies and his deep respect for our family's heritage. He volunteered to help with yard work, bringing flowers, even offering to research the tree's botanical properties for preservation purposes. Grandma Rose, despite her wisdom, was slowly warming to him. He seems genuinely interested in our traditions, she told me one evening. Perhaps it wouldn't hurt to let him learn a few basic care techniques. Are you sure, Grandma? The tree is so precious to us. Maybe it's time to trust someone new. If he's going to be part of our family... I felt sick watching Adrian's manipulation work, but I forced myself to play along. If you think it's the right choice. The next Sunday, Adrian arrived early for what he believed would be his introduction to the money tree's secrets. Grandma Rose had prepared detailed notes about proper care and handling, unaware that she was essentially providing Adrian with the blueprint for his theft. But I was ready for him. While Grandma Rose prepared lunch, I led Adrian to the sunroom, where the tree sat in its place of honor. The morning light made its leaves shimmer like precious stones, and I could see greed flash in Adrian's eyes as he approached it. "It's even more beautiful up close," he said, his voice reverent but calculating. "May I touch it?" Of course. Grandma Rose says the tree needs to get used to new caretakers gradually. As Adrian's hands made contact with the jade leaves, I watched his expression change. The tree's warmth, which had always comforted me, seemed to affect him differently. His face went pale, and he pulled his hands back as if burned. "Something wrong?" I asked innocently. No, just... it's warmer than I expected." What he didn't know was that I'd spent the past week preparing for this moment. The tree sitting before him wasn't the original at all. It was an exact replica I'd commissioned from a master craftsman, complete with heating elements to mimic the original's mystical warmth. The real money tree was safely hidden in a climate-controlled storage unit across town, along with detailed documentation of its provenance and genetic markers. If Adrian and Vivienne wanted to steal from my family, they were welcome to try, but they'd be stealing a worthless fake while I kept the genuine treasure safe. "Grandma Rose will teach you the proper care techniques," I said, guiding him back toward the kitchen. "She's so excited to pass on the family knowledge." Over the next 2 weeks, Adrian threw himself into learning everything about the tree's supposed care. He took meticulous notes, asked detailed questions about its watering schedule and light requirements, even requested cuttings for preservation research. Each request I granted eagerly, knowing that every stolen piece was worthless. Meanwhile, Vivienne's legal troubles mounted. The university had expelled her, and criminal charges for theft and academic fraud were moving forward. She'd lost her apartment and was living in her car, desperately trying to salvage some income from Adrian's plan. Their text messages, which I now monitored through a tracking app I'd installed on Adrian's phone during one of his visits, grew increasingly frantic. "The girlfriend suspects nothing," Adrian wrote. "I'll have everything we need by the end of the month." "It better work," Vivienne replied. "I've got nothing left. If this falls through, we're both finished." But the most satisfying message came 3 days later, when Adrian sent Vivienne a photo of the fake tree's leaves. "Something's wrong," he wrote. "The colour is off, and it's not responding to the grafting techniques you researched." "Impossible," Vivienne shot back. "I followed the genetic analysis perfectly. The tree should be identical to the original specimens." Little did they know their original specimens had been carefully cultivated fakes I'd planted in Vivienne's research months ago, using ordinary jade plants treated to mimic the money tree's appearance. The trap was nearly complete, and soon Adrian and Vivienne would discover that cheating my family came with consequences they'd never imagined. The final act began on a rainy Tuesday night when Adrian made his move. I watched from my bedroom window as he crept through Grandma Rose's backyard, using the key she'd trustingly given him weeks earlier. Vivienne waited in her Honda at the corner, engine running for their planned escape. They worked quickly, carefully uprooting what they believed was the sacred money tree and replacing it with a cheap jade plant from a garden centre. Adrian's hands shook as he loaded her prize into the car, whether from excitement or guilt, I couldn't tell. What they didn't know was that I'd been recording everything from multiple hidden cameras I'd installed throughout the property. Every moment of their betrayal was captured in crystal clear detail, but I wanted to give them enough rope to hang themselves completely. The next morning, I arrived at Grandma Rose's house with coffee and pastries, playing the role of the unsuspecting granddaughter. We discovered the theft together, and her genuine heartbreak nearly broke my resolve. Even knowing the real tree was safe, seeing her tears over what she believed was our family's stolen legacy was almost unbearable. Who could do such a thing, she sobbed, touching the pathetic replacement plant. The tree was everything to our family. I held her as she cried, whispering promises that justice would come. She had no idea how right I was. Within hours, Adrian was at my door with manufactured shock and sympathy. "Isabella, I heard what happened. This is terrible. We have to call the police immediately." His performance was Oscar-worthy, the concerned boyfriend demanding justice for his girlfriend's family. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed him myself. "I don't understand who would do this," I said, letting tears flow freely. "Grandma Rose is devastated. She thinks the family curse will fall on all of us now." "Curse?" Adrian's voice was carefully controlled, but I caught the flicker of fear in his eyes. "She says the tree protects our bloodline. Without it, terrible things happen to our family, and anyone who steals it." I let my voice trail off ominously. "That's just superstition, Isabella. Don't let fear consume you." But over the next week, Adrian's confidence began cracking. The stolen tree was dying in Vivienne's makeshift greenhouse, its leaves turning brown despite their desperate attempts to save it. Worse, their luck had taken a dramatic turn for the worse. Vivienne's criminal trial moved forward with devastating speed. The prosecutor had obtained evidence of her academic fraud from multiple sources, and her public defender seemed more interested in plea bargains than mounting a defense. She faced up to 5 years in prison and complete financial ruin. Adrian's law school troubles began immediately after the theft. A random academic integrity investigation revealed that he'd been cheating on exams for 2 years, using test materials stolen from professors' offices. His scholarship was revoked, his admission cancelled, and his dream of becoming a lawyer evaporated overnight. But the real karmic justice was just beginning. I waited exactly 1 month after their theft before making my next move. Adrian was working a humiliating job at a fast food restaurant, desperately trying to pay rent without his scholarship money. Vivienne was in county jail awaiting trial, her bail set impossibly high. That's when I walked into Adrian's workplace during the lunch rush, accompanied by 2 police detectives and carrying a thick folder of evidence. "Adrian Torres?" Detective Chen asked loudly, drawing stares from every customer in the restaurant. "You're under arrest for theft, conspiracy, and fraud." The look of pure terror on Adrian's face was worth every sleepless night I'd spent planning this moment. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, I leaned close enough for only him to hear. "The tree knew, Adrian. It always knows." His face went white. "Isabella, what are you talking about? I would never." "Save it for your lawyer," I said calmly, then addressed the gathering crowd. "This man stole a priceless family heirloom from my elderly grandmother. The evidence is overwhelming." And it was. Security footage, DNA evidence on the replacement plant, financial records showing their planned sale to collectors, text messages outlining their entire conspiracy. I'd given the police everything they needed for an airtight case. But the most beautiful part of my revenge was yet to come. 3 days later, I visited Vivienne in jail. She looked haggard and desperate, her beautiful hair lank and unwashed, her designer clothes replaced with an orange jumpsuit. "You," she whispered when she saw me through the glass partition. You knew everything." "I knew you were both thieves and liars," I said pleasantly. "What I didn't expect was how quickly karma would catch up with you." "The tree is fake, isn't it?" Her voice was bitter with defeat. "Everything we stole is worthless." "Oh, Vivienne, the tree you stole is just a common jade plant with some heating elements, worth maybe $50. I smiled as her face crumpled. "The real money tree is somewhere safe, still bringing prosperity to my family." "You destroyed our lives over a plant." "No," I said firmly. "You destroyed your own lives through greed and betrayal. I just made sure you faced the consequences." The trial was swift and brutal. Adrian received 7 years for organised theft and fraud. Vivienne got 5 years plus restitution she'd never be able to pay. Both were banned from ever working in their chosen fields again. Meanwhile, the real money tree thrived in its new location. A beautiful conservatory I'd built behind my own house using the insurance money from the theft. Grandma Rose visited daily, marvelling at how quickly our family's fortunes had improved after the tree's disappearance. "It's like the tree is still protecting us from wherever it ended up," she said one afternoon, watering the replacement plant that had actually grown quite lovely with proper care. I smiled, touching the genuine money tree's leaves through the conservatory window. "Maybe the tree's power doesn't come from its physical presence, Grandma. Maybe it comes from the love and loyalty of the family it protects." 6 months later, Adrian's final letter arrived from prison. His handwriting was shaky, desperate. "Isabella, please, I know you're reading this. The nightmares won't stop. I see that tree everywhere. It's driving me insane. Please, I'm begging you, make it stop." I crumpled the letter without finishing it. Karma had chosen its punishment, and I had no intention of interfering with cosmic justice. As I write this, 5 years have passed since my rebirth. Adrian is still in prison, his parole denied twice for violent behaviour. Vivienne was released early for good behaviour, but struggles with severe anxiety and depression. Neither has ever recovered from what they lost. My family, meanwhile, prospers beyond our wildest dreams. The real money tree has grown to twice its original size, its jade leaves more vibrant than ever, and every morning when I water it, I whisper a small prayer of gratitude to whatever force gave me a second chance at life. Some people call it karma, others call it destiny. I call it justice.